Hello everyone. Again, apologies for this slight change of presenter. If Andreas comes while we have talked, he will take over. Good thing I had a quick look at the presentation, and it's only photos and videos, so I can't say anything I want when I'm covered. Okay, so this presentation is about it's about immersive performance that we created within the scopes of a Horizon 2020 project. It's called ReInHerit. So the definition of what we wanted to say about immersive performances is not as we sometimes have it when we talk about immersiveness, when we talk about VR or whatever, but it's mostly about making the visitors in the museum become a little bit more engaged with the exhibition of the museum and participate and also interact and contribute through their interactions in the way a performance was unfolding within sites of cultural heritage. The objective here from the this is our group. This is a project, the ReInHerit. So the objective of that project, and actually the objective of the specific immersive performances, was to see if we can find a way to either two things. First, to see if we can attract more people coming to sites of cultural heritage, to museums and whatever. So the question that was wanted to investigate was, what can we use technology in order to attract more people to the sites of cultural heritage or into museums? And the second was, can this kind of interaction or immersiveness or engagement with technology can help the participants understand a little better what they are observing of the space that this performance or this experiment unfolds. So we have done it 2 times. One, it was at Giorgos Dimoglou mansion, and the other one it was at the cultural at the Bank of Cyprus Cultural Center. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the first one. Both performances were not the same. We had some differences between the 2 performances, and we had a window of 6 months in between. In the first performance, the whole interactions were done by sensors that we placed within the space. We had around 20-something locations in the whole space of Giorgos Dimoglou mansion, and as people were walking around, we were getting data. These data were going into a central server and then back into sound stations, and then the music and the sound within the environment was changing with the way that how people were moving around into different rooms. Now, on top of that, we had, I think, for the first performance, if I'm not mistaken, 15 musicians moving around the space. So there was a kind of interaction between the live musicians and visitors within the house of Giorgos Dimoglou mansion. So this is a house. It's for those of you that don't know, Giorgos Dimoglou was a dragoman or an interpreter during the Ottoman Empire. So it was considered like a very privileged and high position for a Greek to be during that, to be an interpreter, to be able to speak the Turkish language. And so these people were used also in administrative tasks, meaning collecting taxes, whatever. So they were becoming rich and famous gradually, and the house is one such example. It's preserved and it's in the center of Nicosia. You can visit the house if you want. It's open to the public, I mean, and it has, so it has a large interior garden, and upstairs are the rooms. So we used the whole space and we put sensors both in the garden and in the rooms upstairs. And we selected the locations of the sensors in order to highlight and guide the visitors into specific areas of interest. So I'll give you an example. There is the Turkish bath in the garden, and which is, I don't know if you ever had the experience of going to it's kind of feeling a little bit claustrophobic going into that area. We had, so if you were entering inside that, there were the combination of how the lights and the sound was changing while you were moving in there was part of the whole experience. And the same thing in different points and areas within the room. So if we wanted to attract visitors in a specific room and guide them into some artifacts that we wanted to communicate the story behind them, things were going on around those objects. Okay, so like for instance, in this room, while people were moving around, the lighting was changing and the sound, and depending on the volume of people and the movement, this information, as I said, travels into the central server and going back to the sound stations. But at the same time, the musicians that they were working freely within the space, they were also familiar with this concept and they were aware that this is how the whole thing works. So they were also playing along, meaning that depending on how the sound was changing, they were improvising and changing the way they were playing accordingly. So it was a kind of interplay between the musicians and how the audience was behaving, the visitors were behaving within the space. Okay, now we also scan some areas and points of interest, and we created 3D prints of those scans, and we also invited people from the School of Blind. We developed some modules. I would say that you were able to touch. For example, once you were going into the house of Giorgos Dimoglou, in front of the door on the roof is Tyreos, which is a symbol linked to the story of the family and the house. We scanned that. We made a 3D print. Then you can actually touch it and you can feel it. If you are blind or if you have a certain deficiency, visual deficiency, you could actually touch it. But depending on where you were touching and how you were touching that, again, there were some auditory stimulus coming up accordingly. For example, if you were at the top left corner, which there is an eagle, if I remember correctly, when you touch there, then you hear something that relates to an eagle, etc. And these were also blended within the space. So it was a combination of the musicians, the sensors, but also elements from the house, not the original ones, replicas that we created that you can actually touch, play around, and interact with. I think I will skip a few. These are the 3 replicas. This is Tyreos in the making. This is how when the guys created it, and you see here we have the Arduinos and the sensors that capture the movement of the hand in order to trigger auditory stimulus. That's the end result. That's, I don't know what it is, I don't remember, and why it was there. And we also scanned the whole Giorgos Dimoglou mansion, and you can actually access it. You can have a virtual tour of the house. We went there and step by step we scanned it, and we have it like a completely virtual tour of the house. And that was part also of the experience. You could download it you could use it on your mobile phone and find the areas where things are going on. Yeah. And I think there is a video here. Another thing was that Stefanos from our team, he also took photos from specific points within from specific points of interest or areas of interest within the house of Giorgos Dimoglou, and then took this information and created digital artworks projected onto a wall of the house. So everything that was projected, so it was a combination also of visuals. Everything that was projected on there and was run after generative algorithms, processing photos and information that Stefanos took from the house. There is a video. I will show you the video because I think the video will speak on itself. Okay, so another thing was that we had 3 sessions. So we split the performance for this particular performance. For the Bank of Cyprus Cultural Foundation, it was only 1. But for the Giorgos Dimoglou, we had 3 slots of performances. And we kind of modified a little bit the thresholds. That was an underlying research project that we ran, and we didn't say anything to anybody, but that was something for us to see. So what we did was we kind of modified the thresholds of how sensitive or not the sensors were between the 3 slots of the performance. So for instance, in one, it was a little bit difficult to have changes in the auditory stimulus because you needed more movement or more people to go in a specific room in order to trigger some changes. While in the other condition, it was much more sensitive. So we wanted to see if, based on these parameters, we could attract or guide people to go into specific areas based on how the performance was evolving and the whole thing. We didn't manage to get any conclusions on that because after a while it became a little bit chaotic, the whole thing, the performance. There was a lot of people, sometimes the sensors were not working as we expected, and at some point if you have a lot of people moving around, it's like you already passed the threshold, so everything is above what was expected. Because when we were actually developing the algorithms, we were playing around with, so we were moving around like 2 persons, then another one was coming in, and then we were seeing how the cameras and the information was able to identify that. But then when you have 100 people, you're already above the threshold, so it doesn't matter if you're 110 or 90. So at the end of the day, it was all saturated. And also, it started during late in the afternoon, so it was daylight, which was a completely different experience, and it ended up completely darkness, which again, it was much more interesting because you could actually see and have the visuals also participating in this experience. Okay, I want to play the video now. If I find where it is, I think it's this one. This is still the model of Irakleous, and you could hear the sounds that they were triggering while you were touching. The musicians were improvising. They had some basic guidelines from Andreas. Andreas is a composer and musician, so he was explaining and guiding them through basic scales or notes that they were about to follow, but then they were free to improvise. Each slot was around 20 to 30 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And during that time, people were just visiting the museum, watching at the exhibits of the museum, and the musicians were just moving around. Now, the sound effects that you hear, these drops, these are from the sound stations. And this is what was changing while visitors were, depending on the number of people moving around and how they moved. I mean, I know that there was a sensor somewhere within that. Yeah. We had quite a lot of attendance. We had around, in total, around 300 people coming for the 3 slots, which is was quite good for the museum. It's not very clearly visible from the visuals there, but these are elements from the space. So he took photos of the tiles, he took photos of specific parts of the house, and he played with those. And you could, in a way, identify those at some point, but yeah. And that was the conclusion. Okay, so that was the first performance. Now the second that happened at the Bank of Cyprus Cultural Foundation, again it was with a similar concept. Again, musicians being in space. Only this time, the way that the visitors were interacting with the musicians and with the space was not automatically through sensors, but we were asking the visitors to download an application on their phone. I don't know if was anybody or any one of you came to the second performance? No, you were. So, but you were.
Yeah.
Holding the camera. So. You had to download your application, and what we did was, again, we identified many areas within the space in which, while you were moving with your phone, then it was an augmented reality application, and then a virtual object appears. It was an object from the exhibition, and then you could go close to the object and touch the object. And if you were touching the object, then there was a trigger that the object changed the color, but that signified a trigger that again went to the central server and sending it back. And the sound stations were, for each virtual object there was another sound station connected. So depending on how many people interacted with the virtual object and when you interacted, again the sound was changing. Now, before it was working very nicely when we were testing it again. Actually, it kind of worked very nicely for most of the people that were there, but again, we faced difficulties, and the most obvious difficulty that we didn't thought about it was that the place got completely full. So for example, you were entering the space and you were holding a phone and a large object was presented virtually in front of you. So it was beautiful when we tested it, but the space was empty. But when it was with 200 people moving around there, you couldn't actually see the object because we created the objects in a way that you could even put them behind physical objects. That was a little bit of a challenge that we wanted to try and test because we wanted to be kind of a little bit of a treasure hunt in a way thing. So not just for the object to appear, but to search for the object also. So there were points that you had to look under the stairs or whatever to find the objects. So when there were a lot of people moving around, it was almost impossible, and it didn't work as intended. However, still, because we got the data afterwards, and we saw how many people downloaded the applications, how many people interacted with virtual objects, how many, and all this data afterwards, we took them in, and it was quite good, I would say. I mean, a very high percentage of those that downloaded the applications actually found all 14 objects that we had in the space. Yeah. I don't know if there's a video here. So these are the objects. This is a process when we were scanning them with photogrammetry. And these are the objects that then were appearing in the space. Actually, the application, which we have a demo at CYENS that you can go see, is that you were downloading the application. Within the application, then the first step was that you were seeing 9 locations of the foundation, and those locations were communicated through photograph. So you should actually press on the photo, it scales up, and then you were supposed to find that specific angle within the space. So when you actually find that, and then you see you find, for example, it was a statue. So when you found that particular statue and you scan it with your mobile phone, then you knew that the virtual object in the vicinity of that area somewhere appeared. It wasn't straightforward in front of you to see it. It was a bit to the right or to the left, but you knew that, okay, now I have to find that. And you were moving with your phone, and you were finding that object. And then you touch it and you interact with it, etc. So yeah, these are the objects that were scanned. The interactive sound installation. Yeah. That's all pretty much. This is how the application was. I mean, we could get some extra information about the objects. So the concept of communicating what the museum wanted to communicate was still integrated within the application. So you could get the information, the historical data, all of the stuff was part of the application. But because this interactive element was included, and you knew that if you find that object and you interact with that object, you somehow change the whole performance, you were becoming a little bit more engaged, I think. Yeah. Real-time generated video interaction mapping, generated art and video art, again by Stefanos, with projection mapping on sides of the building. Again, it's the same objects used in a more creative way, I would say. Yeah. I don't know if there is a video here. Okay, so you can get the idea. I mean, imagine that somewhere here you had a virtual object augment here in space. It was very difficult. Some objects that were hidden and you had to go and search for them, it was easy to find and that worked nicely. But the large objects that we had in the big spaces where people were moving around, that didn't work out. And it was obvious that it wouldn't work out, but we never thought about it because before when we were making our tests, we were making a test in an empty space. Yeah, I think that's all. There's a video also. Yeah, okay, a small video also for the second performance. I think that was done by George, so thank you, George. The credit goes to Giorgos here. And this is Andreas, for those of you that don't know. Like this statue, for example, was who's this idiot? Don't put that guy there. I don't know if you managed to get from the applications how the objects were. So you will not see then how to look the virtual objects, I guess. Yes, we have it there with the tablet. There you cannot download the application. But you have a tablet that you can actually see the objects how it look. It's a bit different from how it was there. I mean, because there you had to search for them. It was part of it. And then the people was, in a way, somehow, the visitors were somehow guided to the outside of the foundation, and without telling them to go. I mean, it was the flow by itself. And then, yeah, the same thing. The musicians were pretty much guiding the visitors. Because they knew that they at minute 10 they had to do this, minute 15 they had to do this. So there was a kind of a script on how the musicians were moving around, but the way they played was completely, not completely free, they were improvising based on how the stimulations and how the sound stations were activated. Anyway, that's all. Maybe what I can share for 1 or 2 minutes, I don't know how much time. But what I can share is some kind of feedback that I felt, and I went, because after we finished the performance, then we went for dinner with the musicians, and we had a discussion, and also a lot of people were sending emails asking if it's going to be. So we got quite a positive feedback. We also got some negative comments. Some people didn't like it. There were people saying, "But what was that?" I mean, they didn't like the way that the music was and the musicians were moving around. But the interesting thing was that when Andreas was trying to convince the Cyprus Symphonic Orchestra and to participate, which is not an easy thing to do. It wasn't easy. I mean, we had to send letters, etc., etc. You know, the whole administrative and bureaucratic things that are going on in Cyprus. But that was not the most difficult part. The most difficult part was that the musicians themselves were saying, "Okay, what is this bullshit? What am I going to do there? I mean, what applications, etc. I want to go and play." They were not, and Andreas had to face that. He in a way, expressed afterwards when he relaxed and everything. He expressed that he was feeling that he was a bit bullied by the musicians in a way that, why shall we do that? What's that? But after, when we went for dinner, they apologized. I mean, themselves, they felt that they were not feeling very positive about it. So, and they said that it was one of the best experiences they had. I'm talking about the musicians now. About the people, okay, obviously you will get some positive, you will get some negative, depending on who and how they experienced it, if the applications worked on that mobile or not, or whatever. But the musicians themselves, they loved it. They told Andreas that was amazing. We really, it was a very different experience for us. And they said, okay, anytime you want to do it again, count us in 100%. So that was something that could count as a positive, because we use technology not only for the participants and for the audiences to experience the space in a different way, but we also wanted to provide to the musicians a medium or a tool in their hands in order to express themselves a little bit differently and to interact with the audience that participate in their performance. And that was a positive thing. And that's all.